I thought I would do a little project roundup of everything that I knit and crocheted so far this year, and I'm also going to do a reading roundup update at the end of the video. I realise not everyone is interested in that, but some of you are. So if you are, then you can stay until the end of the video. I've done a bunch of stuff and I've read a bunch as well, so I feel like this is going to be a long video. So definitely go grab a drink, grab a snack. I just want to say beforehand as well, if this seems like a lot, that's because it is. I do this full time, so I would not be able to knit and crochet as much as I have done if I had like a 9 to 5. So just keep that in mind. Please do not compare your progress to mine. I'm going to start with cardigans that I made. I made 3, I only finished 1, and they're all the same. And that is my Heidi cardigan, for which I'm going to release a pattern in a couple weeks, which is so soon. I really need to start posting about it. For some reason I keep forgetting. This is one that I actually finished. I've been really wanting to make a sort of cobalt blue cardigan. So for this I used Sandnes Garn Borsted held with Sunday. And initially actually when I tried this on for the first time after blocking, it was so itchy randomly. But I continued to wear it and now it's super soft. So maybe, I don't know, it just needed wearing in. Not sure what happened there. The one thing that I really don't like about it is the buttons, and I actually ordered some blue buttons because I thought I could find some secondhand, or I don't know, for some reason I thought they would just present themselves to me, and that didn't happen. So I ordered some on eBay, and yeah, they're gonna be blue, and they're also gonna be slightly bigger because these are actually too small. They keep sort of popping open, so that isn't very useful. But that is how this turned out. I've just not been wearing it as much because of the button situation. It's just really unpractical if they keep popping open, and don't love the colour, but I think with like blue buttons this is going to be so perfect. Then I also started a red version. I'm really going for the primary colours here, and this isn't quite finished yet. I used the Lana Grossa Nero Winter Softness, and I bought the yarn for this, and I made this when I was in Germany, and I came home planning to finish this, but then I ran out of yarn just before I got to finish the cuff here, which is super annoying. But I'm going to Austria at the end of this week, so I'm hoping that I can find like one more skein is all I need to finish this. And then I also need to sew the sides together and add some buttons on. I think for these buttons I'm gonna go like a deep brown or maybe some kind of beige, I don't know. I really like the texture of this yarn. I love how the ribbing came out, especially. It looks so cool. I think because this is a slightly chunkier yarn and it's a bit more structured, this is really gonna feel like a jacket, which I quite like. I actually didn't do a gauge swatch for this, so I really don't know how much this is gonna grow. The beauty of this cardigan pattern is that it is already oversized, so if it grows massively, then that's fine by me. I just hope it doesn't shrink. That's really not what I'm going for. Then the third Heidi cardigan is just an all black version. Initially I made this for my mum, but I'm now going to keep this because I had a black one of these using a different yarn, and then it got mixed up in the wash and it shrunk. I have plans to fix that one, but it's never gonna be the same fit as the Heidi cardigan, and I would really like a black one. So it was quite lucky that I was already working on another black one, but I did again run out of yarn. So I still need to cast on the second arm, again sew the sides together, and then I have some very dark brown purplish buttons that I think are gonna go really well with this one. Initially I was going to remove the buttons from my shrunk cardigan, but because I'm going to try and fix that one, I don't want to have to like take the buttons off and put new buttons on and stuff like that. So fresh set of buttons on this one. This one I used Hobby Brushed Alpaca with Merino Light. It's a very soft flowy feel, very different to this kind of more structured texture. So even though I've been making like all the same cardigans, they are all very different in terms of feel and fit and use. Then moving on to tops, I made 3 again. One of them is a knit one, and then there's 2 crochet ones. The first one was the knit top. This is how it looks. I'm literally obsessed with it. I love this chocolatey brown color, and I keep going on about this yarn, but it's because it is so good. This is the Isager Trio 1 held double, and it is the softest fabric. I wish you could feel this. Like, I think you can see how flowy it is, but it feels so soft, not like super textured or structured at all, which I think some cottons can be like. But because this is such a nice blend, it just feels so beautiful. This has gone into testing, which is so exciting. So I'm planning to release this in June. I am actually also right now reworking my tie method. So for this one, I just did stockinette, and you can kind of see how they're like curling in on themselves, which I quite like because they are supposed to be ties. However, I find that they don't hold the structure too well. Like the kind of loops here, they just drape down, so you can't really tell that it's supposed to be a tie. So I worked on a sort of ribbed version with an I-cord edge. This hasn't been blocked yet, so it looks a bit wonky, but I'm kind of hoping that this would create more structure and you can kind of tell that it's a bow. I don't know if you can see, but I've just kind of tied it with the stockinette version, and then this is the rib version, and it already has like a lot more, I don't know, texture and depth and hold. Like gravity's gonna do this thing and they're gonna droop down. I think this has more of a bow feel than this little thing. This is how it looks on. So it has the V-neck and sort of like a slight cap sleeve. I don't know why I'm doing this video sitting down, it's really impractical, but I also added some slight shaping around here, so it has like a flowy bottom and just sits a bit looser and kind of like slightly cropped. This is exactly where I like my top to hit. But yeah, this with like a more defined bow, I think is going to be perfect. I'm just going to stand up for the next two tops. I realized that is a lot easier to show you. But I then worked on a crochet version of that top, and it was a lot harder to work on this one. I think I was quite like worn out already from doing all the maths and the configuration of the knitted version, that when I got to doing the crochet one, I was so over it. And creating like crochet versions of a knit version is never as straightforward as you think it is. Whilst the construction of this is the same, the way to get to the fit was so different. You can kind of see how the fabric is a lot less stretchy, which is just the nature of crochet. So I've had to kind of manually add a lot more shaping to this than I did for the knit version, because the knit version just drapes and droops around your body a lot more easily. There were also a few things that I didn't love about this version. First of all, the back kind of goes in too much like that, and the armhole here sits way too low as well. The knit version is much higher. As you can see, the v-neck is also way too low. I kind of have to lift everything up. Otherwise, I liked this kind of slightly flared out shape. The bow I think looks a lot better than the knitted one, obviously because here the sort of structured nature of crochet comes in really handy for the bows. And I do also like the sleeves, so I kind of had to workshop a little bit on this one. I do love the colour. The yarn with the sort of half double crochet stitch really shrinks in during the blocking process, so I have to kind of steam it to get it relaxed and not so like scrunched up. So that was also quite different to the knit version. I then made this second version. I literally finished this a couple of days ago based on the kind of mistakes that I wanted to fix in the blue one. So the back is less kind of like shaped in. It covers a lot more of sort of the back shoulders. The armholes sit a lot higher, and then it kind of feels a lot more snug around here. The v-neck is lifted much higher as well. The flare out remains the same, the bows remain the same. I do need to add a bit more length because I took length off the top. I did already add a couple more rows, but I do think I need like 2 more rows to get that kind of perfect length. I'm really happy with the short rows that I added to the back panel, because otherwise this was really like riding up at the back, sort of like this. I also added some short rows around the shoulder to create the kind of sloped cap sleeve. Like I said, this needed a lot more manual shaping, whereas the knit version, I didn't do any shoulder shaping. It just droops and drapes as it's supposed to. I think I'm going to re-crochet my blue version to make it into this shape, because I don't want to be wasting that yarn. It's so gorgeous. Yeah, I'm gonna try and get this written up, figured out, graded, tech edited, and hopefully release it like a few weeks after the knit version. That would be satisfying for me in my schedule. Okay, moving on. I made a bunch of accessories so far this year, which I want to say is very unlike me. Most of the patterns that I have available on my website are like Scooty accessory patterns, but in general I don't do like a lot of hats and stuff, but I did a few. So I started off this year with a crochet scooty as a present for my sister. It obviously isn't this exact one because I gave it to my sister, but it was basically like this. It was a long scarf with the hood attached. I used a different yarn for her version though, because this one is really scratchy. I forgot which one it is, but I'll add the name. I really don't like wearing this because all these sort of scratchiness sits around your face when you're wearing it, and I've just constantly got like fibers in my mouth. I don't love it. So for hers instead I used Hobby Friends wool, but in the same kind of color scheme, and it just felt so much nicer. This is then how the scooty looks when you wear it. You kind of wrap it once at the back and then you can tie it once at the front and you're ready for the cold. I guess less relevant now that we're going into summer, but wanted to show you anyways. A lot of the accessories actually are projects that I'm prepping ready for this winter, and I think it's going to be really satisfying when it gets to autumn winter this year and I already have all my accessories ready. I don't need to be in a rush to knit them all. I lost my favorite pair of mittens and I was so gutted that I had to immediately knit another pair. So I made, see, I have all the yarn like stuck on my mouth now. Anyways, I made these ones, these brown and cream ones. There's another one hung up on my corkboard behind me. I made a few changes to this one because the ones that I used to wear, the ones that I lost, I knit ages ago and the thumb was super short, and I always said if I made another version, I'd make the thumbs a lot longer, and the kind of top shaping of it was so overcomplicated the way that I made them. Now I have a lot more skills and knowledge on how to construct that a lot better. So that's how these turned out. They are so cute. They fit a lot better around the thumb. The kind of top shaping is really nice. For this I used GB Pitbull, which again I got in Germany. It's an acrylic blend, and I used the same yarn to make a crochet version. These I actually have worn more than my knitted version. I think what I again like about the crochet one is how structured they are. So they are very much like that. They don't, you know, droop and shape as much as the knitted one, which made them so cozy and warm to wear. They're the same construction. They're kind of crocheted flat and then seamed along the side. You can see here. Both the knit and crochet pattern I'm gonna make available for free this winter, and I'm also going to film some video tutorials to go alongside them. So these are literally going to be perfect for gifts this upcoming Christmas, but I'm sure I'll be talking a lot more about them when the time comes, so I won't bore you too much with these, apart from the fact that I did start another knitted mitten, and I used Lang Yarn's Carpe Diem, which is the softest yarn. I really want to use this for some larger projects or just any sort of upcoming projects in general. It's a lovely yarn to work with. I haven't finished this and haven't started a second one yet because this is going to be the video tutorial mitten version. Then I knit a fisherman's beanie. Basically my friend paid me to knit a hat for their partner who had this hand knit hat he was gifted, and he really liked that shape and the fit and everything. So I took some photos and measurements of that hat to recreate for him for his birthday, and I wanted to knit a version before I go and knit his, and my boyfriend Ryan also really wanted a fisherman's hat, so it kind of worked out really well. This is how it turned out. I used the baby cashmere from Lang Yarns, I think. I'm really getting so confused with all of the yarn names, but I'll put the name here as always. From the photos that I took of my friend's hat, I could see that it was a bottom-up construction, so that's what I did for this hat. However, it made, first of all, figuring out the length of the cuff really difficult. I think the cuff on this hat is actually too short, and I also don't love the decrease shape that it creates and the kind of texture that it creates. So for my friend Jack's hat, I went top down instead, and I much prefer how the shaping looked around the top. It wasn't as nice to work with in terms of practicality. You know, kind of starting with such a small rounded shape and then increasing meant that everything was very tight to start with, but it then allowed me to kind of gauge the fold at the bottom. This is superwash yarn, so you're not really working to size that you're wearing, so it's still not a perfect indicator of how long you need the cuff to be, but I feel like you can kind of figure it out in relation to this part to this part. So if I were to knit this again, I think I would go top down instead, mainly just because of this sort of increased shaping I don't love as much. Then the last hat that I worked on was this brown fluffy hat. I have this one hat that I got for my birthday, which I love wearing so much. I love like a big hat, and I wanted to recreate it. I wanted to go even fluffier than the one that I had. So for this I used Hobby Lash, which is like a really fuzzy sort of acrylic yarn, and I think I did go in like the right direction with this, but there are a few things that I would change that I have spoken about before, so I apologize if you have heard me talk about this before and I'm repeating myself. First of all, this hat is way too big. You know, I'm going for big, but I think this is maybe too big. At the same time, I don't think this fold over is big enough, so it kind of needs to like stick out more than the top bit. This also feels very loose, so I can really like take off all of this amount of stitches, make it sit tighter on the head, and then I think my plan is to create a double knit layer on the inside of the fold over to just kind of like bulk it out a little bit more. The fold over also needs to be secured in. I thought it would just kind of like hold like that, but it kind of does droop down a lot more, so I need to be a bit more precise with the construction of this, but I'm going to figure all of that out later this year. I don't want to be making fluffy hats in the height of summer, you know. Then there are three kind of random projects that I worked on quite recently actually. The first one was in my most recent vlog where I cropped my Eve dress to be turned into a skirt. You can see the top half behind me actually, so I steeked the Eve dress to create a two-piece, and the main thing that I wanted to get from that was the skirt so I could wear it in summer. I haven't quite figured out yet what I'm going to do with the top, but I will do something with it obviously. So once I steeked it, I was kind of just left with like a really wide rectangle, and luckily I had some yarn left over from the dress, so I picked up the stitches, knit about 11 more rows whilst decreasing around the same side where previously I did the increases for the dress, and then I knit 11 more rows continuing the decreases, but this time in a 2x2 rib to create some elasticity. At that point the skirt still wasn't tight enough, but that was my plan anyways. It's because I obviously have to get it over my hips, I knew that I had to kind of add some elastic on, and I found this method on TikTok where you kind of slip stitch an elastic thread around the ribbing. So that's what I did. You can see two lines there, and it creates a really nice stretchy waistband, and I love it. It fits so well. Then I really wanted to make a cat bed. I ordered a bunch of this 100% Norwegian wool yarn I didn't want to use for the project that I originally ordered it for, so I thought I could make her a cat bed. And initially I wanted to create a kind of cave, but it wasn't really holding the shape enough, and then I didn't really see her going in it that much either. She is quite particular, and she knows when things are supposed to be for her, and when I want her to use certain things, she refuses for some reason, and she will just use everything else. So as I finished the cat bed, I knew that she wasn't going to use it because she's annoying like that. So what I did instead was I turned it into a little footstool. I had this opening here, which initially was for her to go into the cat bed, which I kind of needed to cover, so I just used the same yarn that I used at the bottom, the drop snow, to add this flap, and I added some buttons, and then within the footstool I'm keeping two of our guest bed pillows, so this is perfect storage. And it also works great in here as a footstool. When I'm sitting on this chair especially, I can stretch my legs out, which I love. Betty has completely ignored this thing. She would sit on it as I was assembling it, but now that it's finished and I try to get her to sit on it, she refuses to, because she knows that I want her to sit on it, and she hates being told what to do. But I love the colours of it. I think it blends in really nice with the room, and I'm just really chuffed with this. Then the last thing that I worked on, which is super random, is a bunch of crochet letters spelling out "In yarn we trust," and I'm currently kind of stretching it out because my plan is to lay them out in a frame and hang it up on a wall. I think that'll be so cute. This is an S, for example. I really kind of just free-handed them. I didn't need them to be perfect, just kind of loosey-goosey fun vibes. And I will be turning these into t-shirts. I feel like I should be more secretive about that, but I don't really see the point in that. They will hopefully be turned into t-shirts. I already had a little play with the layout, but then like other things took over. But yeah, I wanted to release a new summer t-shirt, so that's gonna be that. Yeah, a bit random, but quite fun to just have a play with the yarn. Like, it felt really tactile and creative and quite liberating to just be like, this doesn't really look great, but once you lay it all out, it looks fun. And that is everything that I knit and crocheted so far this year. I think it's a pretty good amount. I got a lot of things done that I set out to do this sort of winter time. I guess March isn't really winter anymore, but the Q1, I've done a lot in Q1. Is this Q1? I'm so glad that I don't have to work around quarters anymore, not officially anyways. I'm glad I don't have to take meetings where you talk about QI objectives. But anyways, I'm gonna go grab the books that I read this year. If you're not interested in that, you can click away now. But if you are, stick around and we're gonna chat books. All right, here we go. I love that I can actually show you some physical books because a lot of the time they're either audio or Kindle books, but I did a lot of physical reading to make my way through my physical TBR. I actually set myself the challenge kind of very last minute, like on the 1st of January, I think, to not buy any new books this year. That includes Kindle books, any physical books. The only exception is when I'm in charity shops and I see books, I don't really see the issue of buying them there, and it happens not as frequently. Otherwise, I really wanted to make my way through all the incredible books that I have in my home. Ryan and I also have a combined Kindle library, so he has lots of great books that I haven't read yet. Yeah, it's been going pretty good. I don't miss buying more books. In fact, I feel very content with, like, I can just scroll away when someone starts recommending me books online because I'm not going to buy them anyways, and I don't feel as overwhelmed. I started the year with Calabasas by R.F. Kuang. I read Babel a couple months before this and I absolutely loved it. A lot of the things that I liked about Babel, I also really liked about this. I find she's really good at writing fantasy and magic that is rooted in reality. Like, there's a lot of reasoning about like where the magic comes from and what it means. The magic in this book is based on logic and paradoxes, and it really makes the magic in this story a lot more plausible and based in reality. So this book is about two people who go to hell to try and save their professor who died and went to hell, and they have to go through and survive all these different stages of hell, which then turns into a lot of philosophical questions about life and death and sort of the bad parts of humanity and redemption as well. It's quite a chunky book, but I thought the story was very fast-paced, very engaging. The story kind of changes between the current events that are happening with also some memories of when they were at university, how everything kind of came to be, slowly drip feeding the context. There are a couple of things that I didn't like as much as I did in Babel. I didn't like the sort of romance elements. I'm not big into romance anymore, I don't think. And what I much preferred about Babel was the friendship elements. Like, the friendship felt very heartfelt. The sort of male love interest is really kind of portrayed as a villain, but he seems really sweet, and like, I don't believe that he's a bad person. Like, you can tell right from the beginning that this is just pure miscommunication, and I didn't like how predictable that was. That kind of stopped me from giving it 5 stars, so this was a 4.5 star. I then listened to Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. This was the last book of Gillian Flynn's that I hadn't read yet, and it might be my favourite. I thought Sharp Objects was my favourite, but this one I thought was even better. It is very similar to all of her other writing, where it takes place in a very small American town. there's a murder. The protagonist is quite unlikable, but kind of rightfully so. You know, terrible things have happened to her. The story basically follows our protagonist, whose whole family was murdered by her brother. Her brother is now in prison, and she joins this kind of true crime fan base who are trying to find the real killer. They do not believe that her brother murdered her family. She was very young when her family was murdered, so her memories are kind of very skewed. So it's kind of her slowly coming to terms with the fact that her memories might not be as true as she thought they were. And you're kind of following the current events of her trying to figure out what is going on, mixed in with some memories from her as a child, but also from her brother on the day of the murder, and some kind of other characters that live in this small town. I actually think Gillian Flynn is like my Donna Tartt, you know, where people wait years and years and years for her to release another book. Where's Gillian Flynn at with her new novels? I need another one. I then read Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I only ever read Carrie before, so I really want to read more of his, and I've seen the TV show and I remember really liking it, so I thought I'd give this one a go. I have terrible memory of things that I've watched and seen, so reading this book was still very much a surprise of all the things that happened. There were a few things that annoyed me right at the beginning that all redeemed themselves at the end. This is a story about sort of like an incel villain who is, you know, convinced the whole world is against him, and who commits a mass murder by driving into a large group of people outside a job centre. And it then follows Bill Rogers, who's a retired detective who's quite depressed and feels very low because he no longer gets to work as a detective. So he kind of gets taunted by this murderer, and he gets this sort of lust for life back as he's trying to solve exactly what happened. Really interesting because both the detective and the murderer are trying to constantly outsmart each other, but the characters feel very real in that sometimes the detective massively f***s up, sometimes the murderer massively f***s up, but they always think they're like one step ahead of each other. I gave this one 3 stars. Solid, good story. Then I listened to Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I knew that not everyone likes this book, and I can really see why. For me, I also didn't love it. I think R.F. Kuang is an amazing writer. Like, I still really enjoyed the writing of this book. It just felt weird, like the formatting of this. I wish it wasn't from a first person perspective, because it felt really weird how the perspective sometimes like broke the fourth wall and would speak to us directly, especially because the protagonist is so unlikable and so irredeemable. The character kind of just felt like a vessel for R.F. Kuang to let out all of her like gripes and frustrations with the publishing world. I thought it was really interesting to read about some of the sort of publishing insights, which I would like to think are based on like true events and real experience. But yeah, it was just a weird format for this story. Then I listened to Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This was a reread for me, but I love Dark Places so much and I needed an audiobook to listen to at the time. So once again, I watched the TV show, I read the book, and I still, when I was listening to the audiobook, wasn't quite sure who committed the murder. I did remember and I did know right at the start, but then as I was listening to the story, I was like, maybe I remember this wrong. It's such a good book. I highly recommend the TV show as well. Read the book first, then watch the show. Children are getting murdered in this small town, and we follow this reporter who gets sent to the small town to find out about what's happening and obviously report on the murder. But she also happened to grow up in this town, so she kind of interacts with her estranged family, and I really like the dynamic of people recognizing her, seeing her as one of their own, but equally there's kind of distance because she's a journalist and trying to find out things that this small town is trying to keep a secret. Then I read Bury My Bones in the Midnight Soil. I've actually lent this to one of my friends to read because I thought they would really like it. I had high hopes for this book. I heard so much good stuff about it, which made me a little bit apprehensive, thinking that maybe this was like overhyped, but it was so good. This was the most romantic story I've read in a long time. Like I said, I don't really read a lot of romance, and this didn't feel like a romance book in itself. It was just written very romantically. It follows the story of 3 different women in different periods of time, like literally different centuries. I liked the vampire rules that were established. I also liked how it wasn't always talked about how they were vampires. Like, you knew they were vampires by the way that they were described and the way they were acting, but I like that the author didn't introduce every single new character by telling us that they're a vampire, you know. She trusted us enough to know that they were one. I really like the rules of this vampiric universe as well. I liked how the vampire selves were just like a heightened version of who these people were as humans as well. I thought that kind of made a lot of sense. Then I read Flesh, and I have some conflicting thoughts about this. I initially thought that this was a story about a teenager throughout the entire book. It kind of says so in the blurb, but then it does also go on to say, sort of, as the years pass, you follow this man's life. I wish we stayed more in the sort of child, teenage self of the protagonist. This is very much a story about abuse, about immigration, about class. It has very difficult topics that it deals with. However, the protagonist is so one-dimensional, which I initially thought was down to the fact that he was a teenage boy. You know, he didn't really express himself very much. The dialogue is very fast-paced, like it's kind of written like a script a lot of the time, which I actually really enjoyed. But this man kind of goes through life with things happening to him and fortune just coming his way without him really having to like do anything for it. And it kind of just made me think, like, whilst, you know, the protagonist is an immigrant and he has a lot of difficulties that he deals with, he is still a man, and like things just happen to him because he's a man and he seemingly doesn't have to work very much for it. So I really enjoyed like the first half, I guess. The later half, I was just fed up with him. I just thought, I don't understand who this person really is. Then I listened to All Is Well by Mona Awad. I obviously have the physical copy as well, but I listened to the audiobook version because it was available on Spotify. I had high hopes for this because I loved Bunny, and lots of people told me that I should read this because I liked Bunny, and I've had this sitting on my bookshelf for over a year. This is a story about chronic illness. As with Mona Awad's writing, there's sort of these fantastical elements which take the protagonist's pain away and place it on other people around her. It obviously says a lot about like being a woman with chronic pain, not being taken seriously. The protagonist is a drama teacher at a school and they're putting on a Shakespeare play. So there's kind of the blend between real life and theatre play. I really didn't like the protagonist, which I felt bad about because the whole story is about like being a woman with chronic pain, not being taken seriously. But I don't understand why she had beef with literal children. Like, she had so much beef with these kids that she was teaching that made me not really feel for her very much. Like, she was not a nice person. I also didn't like how the character was constantly catching up with knowledge that we were already presented with. Like, I want to be learning things alongside the character, not know about them and then read about the character finding things out. That's so boring and frustrating because it just feels like so obvious. Why is the protagonist ignoring all of these obvious things and reasoning to why things are happening to her? In my notes, I just put, she's so cruel, it's so uncomfortable to read. Next, I read Slow Horses, another one of Ryan's Kindle contributions. I have again watched the show as well. I remember not liking the first season very much, whereas I love all the seasons after that. And I remembered that as I was reading this book because I just couldn't really get into it when I started out. It is written so well, like in such an intelligent way, that I felt a bit slow when I was reading it. There was a lot of like London slang, a lot of MI5 slang that I couldn't really get behind initially, but I kind of powered through and thought about the way that I watched the show. It's very similar, where I haven't really got a clue about all the technicalities of things, but I still kind of managed to pick up the plot. So I did that with the book and it really paid off. I really enjoyed the ending. It came together really well. The characters are so lovable, even though they are unlikable. They're not like irredeemably unlikable. They are so human. I think I gave that a 3-star. Then I finally listened to The Hunger Games on audiobook. My friends and I had just done a movie marathon where we watched all the films, and I thought initially I wouldn't be able to then read the books until later this year just to give myself a break, but I was so hooked from watching those films again that I went straight into listening to the audiobook, and it is so good. Like, this book deserves all the hype that it gets. You know, what I really like about The Hunger Games is that it doesn't have that chosen one sort of narrative, but I think in the books it is even more blatantly obvious how Katniss was just a pawn for something that had already been brewing for a much longer time. I don't really know what to say about this book that hasn't already been said before, apart from the fact that it is so engaging, and even though I have watched the films many times and I've not forgotten about what happens in them, like, I know the plot of The Hunger Games very well, it didn't make listening to this any less interesting. I was still so hooked. So yeah, easy 5-star for me. Then I read Madonna in a Fur Coat. This is what I wanted my brilliant friend to be like. It is so heartfelt, again, so romantic. It felt incredibly modern. I cannot believe that this was written in the 1940s. This feels so ahead of its time. Even people nowadays couldn't write such complex modern characters, which is crazy to me. It has a really good introduction as well, which gives the book a lot more context. Yeah, it's not a very big book, so I definitely think you should give this a read. This was, again, an easy 5-star for me. Then I read The Safe Keep, which was a very good follow-on story from Madonna in a Fur Coat. This is set in the 60s, I think, and mostly follows 2 women. One woman lives alone in this house, and the other woman comes to live with her for a few weeks. This book is so confusing to me because I am giving this 5 stars. However, I felt so frustrated reading it. I figured out the plot twist within the first 30 pages, and I don't know if the plot is supposed to be this obvious. I thought it was so incredibly on the nose. It really made the relationship between these 2 women frustrating for me, because Isabella, the woman who lives in this house, is again so mean and so horrible and so unlikable in a way that I don't see redeemable. The naivety, the ignorance that this character exudes was frustrating and aggravating to read. On the flip side, I don't understand how the other woman who goes to live with Isabella, Eva, is drawn to Isabella in any way, because Isabella's personality is so repulsive, and yes, she opens up and warms up a lot more because of the plot twist at the end and because of Eva's knowledge of Isabella. I don't see why this relationship ever came about. I continue to read it because it was so well written and so immersive, and towards the end I kind of thought maybe my annoyance with a lot of the things in this book are down to sort of my lack of relevance to the time period. I can't relate to what it must have been like to be a teenager post-war in the 60s and how repressed your sexuality would have had to be to literally fall in love with your enemy. I don't know if I'm also taking this too not serious, but whether I'm holding the characters too high of a standard. That could also be. It definitely didn't, you know, deter from the fact that this is a brilliant book, 5-star. It just made me feel a lot of complicated emotions and frustrations. And I have also been reading and listening to Wuthering Heights this entire year, from January onwards, and I still haven't finished it. I gave it a go as a physical copy, I gave it a go on my Kindle, and most recently found that listening to it on audiobook I actually much preferred. I'm about halfway through, like I'm now in the 2nd act with the children. I think I had to put a pause to it because I found it so depressing. It's interesting how all of the adaptations that have been done are always about the first half of the book, you know, about Kathy and Heathcliff, when what I've read so far from the 2nd half about the children, I find a lot more devastating. Like, there's a lot more doomed romance going on in the 2nd half. Like, these children haven't even got a clue that they were kind of born into this life of misery at the hands of their parents, like the generational trauma. It's a lot. So I will finish this book eventually. I'm just taking my time with it. I understand that this is high school reading here in the UK and that maybe I'm being ridiculous for not being able to finish it sooner, but I'm taking my time with it. And that's fine. Oh, I just realised the whole time I was talking about the Hunger Games, I was holding up Catching Fire when this is the Hunger Games book. But I am listening to Catching Fire at the moment on audiobook. I have an hour left. Catching Fire is my favourite film. I think I preferred the Hunger Games book to Catching Fire. It's still a fantastic book. I really enjoy it. So I'm expecting that to be another 5 stars. And that is everything that I read so far this year. I've been chatting for so long and I'm so hungry that I'm just going to end the video here. I really hope you enjoyed seeing everything that I've made and everything that I read. Thank you as always so much for watching. I really hope to see you in the next video. But until then, goodbye.